Ever wonder what a flipped classroom is and why it's so effective for teaching? I'm Dr. Omar Awan. I'm a physician and a public health contributor for Forbes.com. I want to talk today about the flipped classroom, how it contrasts with a traditional lecture, and why it's so effective for learning. If you think back to when you were in college, you may have attended a big lecture hall with hundreds of other individuals, and there was likely a teacher teaching at the lecture hall. You were passively listening to that lecture, taking notes, and there was a passive dissemination of material with you taking notes and without much interaction and learning. If you contrast that to a flipped classroom where the teacher may give you an assignment to do prior to the teaching experience, that may include reading an article, watching a video, and then you coming into the teaching session where you're actively applying and synthesizing those skills that were to be learned or assigned before the lecture. So you can see that this model, the flipped classroom, is much more active. Often students work in groups, they engage with each other, and there's a lot of reciprocal learning and peer-to-peer learning between individuals through this flipped classroom model. Now, if we dissect the difference between a flipped classroom and a traditional lecture, the type of learning in a traditional lecture is passive. The teacher or the lecturer is conveying that information to you, and you're taking down notes. In a flipped classroom, the teaching is active. You're working together in groups, you're bouncing ideas off of each other, and there's much more of an interactive, engaging type of learning. The access to knowledge is also different. In a traditional lecture, you're getting all of the knowledge from the teacher. However, in a flipped classroom, the access of knowledge is actually direct. You own the access to knowledge through the assignment that you're doing beforehand, and also during class time. The access of knowledge is, by interacting with others and learning from others. The mastery of knowledge and the homework is also different. So in a traditional lecture, the mastery of the information and homework typically occurs after the lecture. But in a flipped classroom, you're doing homework prior to the lecture. So you're learning information on your own prior to the lecture, and you're actually mastering the information during class time. And the way the teacher is viewed is also very different. So in a traditional lecture, the teacher is seen as a lecturer, as someone that's distilling and disseminating information in front of you in a lecture hall. However, in a flipped classroom, the teacher is seen more as a facilitator, a coach, a mentor, someone that's kind of guiding you to reach your goals, to understand important fundamental principles. So if we take a look at why is it that this model, this flipped classroom model, is so effective in educational pedagogy, whether it's applied in grade school, colleges, medical education, well, first of all, it's an active way of learning. Research has shown that active learning leads to better learning outcomes, better learning retention. It's also fun. Students enjoy working with each other, bouncing ideas off of each other. It's just an enjoyable experience. There's also more interaction. You're not passively just taking notes down. You're talking to others. You're working in groups. You're applying knowledge and ideas actively, making it much more engaging. The other thing about the flipped classroom is that it really forces you to learn in a friendly environment where learning is very safe, right? You're working with other individuals. Your teacher is seen as a coach or a mentor, and this allows for the learning experience to be tailored to you and it being enjoyable. It also satisfies adult principles of learning, also known as andragogy, right? Because it's relevant to your type of learning and you're a part of the learning process. And adults want to feel like they're part of the learning process, and that's exactly what the flipped classroom does. Now, let me give you an example of how a flipped classroom could be used in radiology, which happens to be my field. So if I was teaching a lecture on musculoskeletal soft tissue tumors, I would ask my students to watch a YouTube video, maybe on a world expert like Dr. Mark Murphy. They would watch a 15 to 20-minute video gaining knowledge about how we diagnose musculoskeletal tumors on imaging. Then during class time or during the lecture, I would have a bunch of unknown cases. I would have them as unknowns, and I would have audience response where I would, show questions in an anonymous format, asking them to interact with the images and tell what the differential diagnosis or the diagnosis was for various tumors based on imaging. So that way they're applying and synthesizing knowledge that they would have already learned before class time. That's an example of how you can use the flipped classroom. These here are my sources, all the sources that I use to prepare this talk. Notice the last source is a TED Talk by Salman Khan talking about how videos have been used to reinvent education. It talks about the flipped classroom. I recommend you watch that video and look at some of these other sources that are posted here. As far as what's next, for those of you who are taking the ARRS CEDP course, I look forward to meeting you, and we're going to design a flipped classroom for one of your teaching sessions. So that's what's going to happen next. Thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this video. And as always be kind to yourself and to others around you.